Hello and welcome to another video. I'm going to be responding to another article I disagree with, this time an opinion piece on the New York Times called "Life is Short, That's the Point." The big ideas are mortality is not something to be overcome. It is integral to our humanity. It was posted on August 18th. Consider the fact of modern life. Nearly all the technological products that we buy and use are designed with planned obsolescence in mind. They are built specifically to fail after a relatively short period. One year, 2, maybe 5. If you doubt that, think about how often you have to replace your smartphone. Gadgets are designed to die. Well, the last time I had to replace my smartphone was because I switched carriers, and they had this retarded rule or something that prevented them from being able to just utilize the phone I already had. And the other times I had to replace my smartphone was because they broke. That isn't exactly planned obsolescence other than on the part of an outsider party from the manufacturers of that phone. I'm not saying that planned obsolescence isn't a thing, it is, but it's not quite as bad as you're making it out to be. If you buy a computer today, you should be able to use it half a decade later, no problem. The irony, however, is that the same Silicon Valley culture that produces these gadgets seems to be obsessed with living forever. That's because people don't want to die, while smartphones have no desires at all, let alone any that would push them into wanting an extended life. Today's life extension movement includes venture capitalists like the tech billionaire Peter Thiel, pouring money into anti-aging and life extension startups. While the rumor that Mr. Thiel received regular blood transfusions from 18-year-olds turned out to be false, there is, of course, an actual company, Ambrosia Plasma, that provides young plasma infusions for $8,000 a liter. And Google launched the biotech company Calico to increase its understanding of the biology that controls lifespan, and bolstered that goal by conducting research on the long-living naked mole rat, a species that shows little to no signs of aging. Well, it is true, we are at the point in our understanding of biology where we can try to tackle aging itself. That's a milestone, similar to the milestone in physics where we were able to tackle observing the patterns and interactions of atoms and electrons. It's a good thing, because aging sucks. It robs people of their ability to experience the world. It makes it harder to live and harder to experience happiness as a result. It is a deteriorating condition, and the closer we are to fixing that, the happier we would be. In recent years, the lure of disrupting death has become a hot industry. Paul Bennett, a partner at the design consultancy IDEO, was among the first to tap into it. A profile in the California Sunday magazine in 2015 described an epiphany he had. "Oh," he told himself, "you need to redesign death. Since then, an entire new market has flourished. Death as a conduit for innovation. Death as a participatory exhibit, I'll just say. Death as the organizing principle for networking dinners. Death as an app." There are now people who refer to themselves as longevity entrepreneurs. They see death not as a problem, but rather as something to be eliminated. Instead of pursuing a good death, why die at all? Beneath the surface of this quest for eternal life seems to be an unwillingness on the part of its proponents to imagine the world without themselves in it. In a very fundamental way, this tendency is inhuman. I mean, one thing just to say right now is they do see death as a problem, which is why they think it's something to be eliminated. Problems tend to be eliminated, and that's exactly what dying is. And how exactly do you pursue a good death? Is it an immediate one? You can just do that with a pistol and your own forehead. No need to go through a lot of hoops for that. Or is it one with all your friends and family? Well, what if they're all dead? Then you can't exactly experience a good death there as it is. But the fact of the matter is, there really isn't a good death. It's the end. There is no joy in ending your existence unless you're severely depressed or in a really shitty state in life. But I'm pretty sure that's not what you're thinking about when you imagine people pursuing a good death. The fact of the matter is, though, human beings don't want to die. In fact, it's sort of ingrained into us to avoid death. Ignoring science and medicine and society and civilization, we tend to be hesitant about potential threats, even to an irrational degree, because if it turns out to be a threat, that could be our end. The fear of heights, for example, stems from an aversion to death. When you touch a really hot surface and you immediately pull your hand back because it's painful, that too is our body trying to avoid death. Because if we burn ourselves too severely, we die. But since then, we have formed civilization and science, and that trend has only continued. We've developed medicine. What is medicine if not trying to avoid death? A person is sick with a disease that could kill them. We develop medication to combat that disease and ensure the person is able to live to see another day. A person is severely injured. We developed emergency procedures to handle an incredibly injured person so that they will live and not bleed out, or not die of asphyxiation, or just, not die. And that's the exact same thing that these people are doing at another level. Human beings don't like death. In her new book, Natural Causes, An Epidemic of Wellness, the Certainty of Dying, and Killing Ourselves to Live Longer, Barbara, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, writes, "You can think of death bitterly or with resignation as a tragic interruption of your life and take every possible measure to postpone it. Or, more realistically, you can think of life as an interruption of an eternity of personal non-existence and seize it as a brief opportunity to observe and interact with the living, ever-surprising world around us." Is it not technically both? Death is a bitter thing. It is a tragic interruption of one's life. How many people have had plans for the future only to die and will never be able to fulfill those plans? How many of those plans might have been beneficial to a ton of people? Or just beneficial to themselves, give them a bit of happiness, one of the things that makes living worth living. Yeah, there's an eternity of time before I was born, but now that I am, I don't see any reason for it to go away and have an eternity of non-existence. I've experienced non-existence already. It sucks. I was taken by her formulation. This notion that our experience of life, though unique to us, is just part of a broader continuum. Our time here is but a blip, and when we leave, the great world continues to spin. As such, the appreciation of our own lives has much to do with the ever-increasing awareness of its relative brevity. It is this, an awareness and acceptance of our own mortality, that makes us human. And it is the impetus, I'd argue, for living our lives to the fullest. Well, I'd argue that if we could live far, far longer than we do now, there would still be a huge amount of impetus and drive. One of the problems with society's attitude to climate change from older generations is this knowledge that they're going to die. They don't have to worry about the environment completely falling apart. They'll be underground or scattered ashes. So let the next generation handle it. But if they lived long enough, if there was that assurance that they would live long enough to face the consequences, they might be more driven to do something to prevent those consequences. You know, some of the greatest movements in human history, societal movements, have been based on the idea of wanting to have a better tomorrow. The civil rights movements, for example, want to see a better tomorrow where races would be deemed equal and people would be judged based on their character, not their skin color. While some of them have lived long enough to see that world, some of them have not. And it's not due to murders or lynchings or any malpractice by other human beings, but instead they got sick and died. They fell down the stairs and died. They choked eating some food and died. The world they fought so hard for and dreamed so fondly of, they would never get to see. If we are able to prevent death more, to the point where we are, in all intents and purposes, immortal, let's say, I would say there'd be even more of a drive for movements like that, knowing that they'd be able to experience their work. But that's just me. There was a brief period in my own life, less than 2 years, in which I got married, lost my mother to cancer, had a miscarriage, bought a house, and gave birth to a child. Experiencing all of this in so short a time span made me feel almost too human. That barrage of ends and beginnings left me intensely aware of the fragility of life as well as enthralled by the glorious intensity of it. I lost and simultaneously gained so much. Today, this awareness of the temporal nature of it all leaves me determined to seize, observe, and interact with the days that remained. It is a knowledge of how quickly, sometimes tragically, things can change or disappear that fuels my urgency to be in the present. And that's exactly it, to be in the present. No thought about the future. Whatever comes in the future comes in the future, but I might be dead. So why fucking think about long-term consequences? As a teenager, I remember lamenting how horrible and unfair life was, only to have my parents respond that one couldn't appreciate the good without experiencing the bad. Back then, hearing that was annoying. As an adult, it remains annoying, but it's also completely true. It's also kind of shitty if you think about it. And your solution to that is just to throw your hands up and say, well, that's life. Gotta experience the bad to have the good. Imagine how shitty the world would be if everyone was like you. Kids would still have polio because, well, sometimes kids get polio. Gotta experience the bad to have the good. I mean, it's life. It's short. That's the purpose. You know, a lot of people out there don't just throw their hands up because something is or always has been, but have a desire to see improvements. And those people are the ones who are advocating against death, advocating for technocratic scientific solutions to aging. But if you want to wither away, get osteoporosis, lose your grip on reality, have your mind deteriorate, so be it. But I don't think anyone else should be subjected to that just because you romanticize a shitty state of humanity for no other reason than it's always existed. It is rare for us to give much thought of the challenges we would face if there were no end to our time on Earth. In fact, it's a very detrimental thing. Would the condition of our bodies affect the condition of our minds? Would everyone live forever, or just those with the means to afford it? Could you opt out of eternal life? Would inequality dissolve, or would become even more of an intractable problem? Would we still gain the empathy, wisdom, and insight that can come with age? Technological breakthroughs can be life-changing, but I believe that our humanity, our humanness, is inextricably intertwined with the fact of our mortality, and no scientific fountain of youth can ever cause that to change. And a bit of the author, and that's the end. Like I said, death is shitty and human beings don't want to die. Nobody likes watching a loved one die or hearing about a loved one deaths. Nor do they like their friends dying, nor do they like their pets dying, nor do they like celebrities. They especially enjoy the content of dying. Well, it is true that death can rob the world of a lot of very shitty people. There's quite a few people I think the world would greatly benefit if they would fucking die already. But as a rule of thumb, I think we should fight against death. And the way to do that is through anti-aging research. Stop believing in mythological solutions, fountains of youth, and all of that stuff, and actually putting our minds to the test and ending this scourge on humankind. I stated that the only reason she views death and dying so fondly is because it's always been around. And because it's always been around, and because there's no way to avoid it, we've tried to rationalize it. We've tried to cope with it. It is a big part of being human. Every single human that has ever existed so far died. At least the ones who aren't alive anymore. And the ones alive now, there's no guarantee that they'll still be alive 200, 300, 500 years in the future. But if given the choice, if given the option between I want to die now and I want to keep living and experiencing this world and seeing what I can do and seeing what it can do for me, people are going to choose the latter. To anyone who so romanticizes death and has such titles as life is short, that's a point, would you be okay with falling down the stairs and cracking your head open? Would you be okay if you are walking down the street and somebody rushes up at you, a random mugging, and because you didn't react fast enough in time, they just shoot you and leave? Would you be okay with contracting terminal cancer and realizing that, yep, this is it? Any plans I had for the far future are now done away with because of this thing that's beyond my control? Probably not, nor is anyone else. And when you realize that there's things that you want to look forward to, things that you want to see, and that the actual fact of dying in such ways, or any way, to be honest, like rather in a car crash, or you swim and drown, or you get stung by an insect you didn't know you were allergic to and die because nobody had an EpiPen nearby. And once you realize that's dying, that's death, that's this thing that you're thinking so fondly of, and oh, it's an integral part of being human, yeah, it doesn't sound good. Let's not do it. Anyways, that concludes the video. No more on death and dying as far as I can see, other than Trump's campaign in the near future. So I hope you enjoyed the video, that I gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care.